Up next in the broadcast, ahead of tomorrow's fall harvest holiday, almost 500,000 cars leave Seoul, heading to hometowns all across the nation to celebrate Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving. After yesterday's three-way meetings between the president and party leaders of the ruling and main opposition parties ended without agreement, legislation remains collecting dust at the National Assembly. U.S. authorities identified the gunman in a deadly shooting rampage that took place just kilometers away from the White House and the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Primetime News begins now.
Good evening and welcome to Primetime News. It's Tuesday, September 17th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Yoo Ji-hye.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, ahead of the Chuseok holiday, or Korea's Thanksgiving, an early exodus began on Tuesday with hundreds of thousands of cars heading to people's hometowns.
For the check on the traffic conditions in the country this evening, Arirang News' Song Ji-sun is standing by at Seoul toll gate. Ji-sun, how are things looking at this hour?
While Ji-hye highway started getting packed from noon, and more cars passed through Seoul toll gate this evening, with people getting off from work hitting the road. Now, Korea Express Corporation expected 430,000 cars to exit Seoul this Tuesday, and 380,000 cars have already passed the left capital as of 9 p.m. The estimated travel time from Seoul to Busan is about 6.5 hours for people leaving now. Now, keep in mind that the driving time from Seoul to Busan is usually 4.5 to 5 hours. And the traffic is expected to be worse tomorrow starting in the morning, reaching its peak at noon. Korea Express predicts it could take up to 9.5 hours to get from Seoul to Busan tomorrow, and added that the traffic gets backed up at earlier hours each year.
Each year, people depart at earlier hours. 2 years ago, people left home at 5 a.m. on the first day of Chuseok holiday, and last year, cars started to head out at 4 a.m. With more data at their disposal, people are trying to avoid the traffic as much as they can.
Ji-sun, we hear that the holiday exodus this time around will be the largest we have ever seen in the country. Tell us more.
You're right, Ji-hye. Officials predict this with the largest number of Koreans traveling during Chuseok ever. A record of 35 million Koreans are expected to travel during this year's Chuseok holiday season, with an average of 5.8 million people moving a day. Now that's a 5% increase from last year's Chuseok and 10% rise from this year's Seollal, or the New Year's. Now the most people are expected to travel on Thursday, the day of Chuseok, with 7.3 million people expected on the road, and roads will likely be packed with people traveling back to their homes after they complete the traditional memorial services in the morning. Now, the traffic won't be as bad for people heading back to the capital after the holiday, as people are expected to head back to Seoul on different days leading into the weekend. Authorities also advise the public to stay alert during the long hours of driving, as there are usually more traffic accidents during the holiday, whether because of drowsy drivers or people driving while drunk. To avoid the highly congested roads, please make use of your smartphone applications for the latest traffic updates and use alternate routes when possible. Have a safe trip home and hope you have a great holiday. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Ji-sun. That was our Song Ji-sun reporting live from the Seoul toll gate on the Gyeongbu Highway.
Now over to continuous gridlock over at the National Assembly. President Park and the opposition party openly expressed their displeasure with the outcome of their meeting from the day before.
The impasse continues despite yesterday's attempts to sit down and resolve differences. Our Kim Yeon-ji has more on the worsening political climate.
It looks like business at the National Assembly will stay on hold for a while, after a highly anticipated meeting between the president and rival parties failed to produce an agreement on how to end an impasse that's dragged on for more than a month. After the meeting, the Democratic Party said it would continue a street campaign it started over a month ago to protest the spy agency's alleged meddling in last year's presidential election. The campaign has effectively stalled parliamentary business, which means that a string of important livelihood bills, including a government tax revision plan and next year's budget, as well as measures to boost the real estate market, are still hanging in the balance. President Park on Tuesday slammed the opposition party for its decision to continue with its street protests.
야당에서 장외투쟁을 고집하면서 민생을 외면한다면 국민적인 저항에 부딪힐 것입니다. 그리고 그 책임 또한 야당이 져야 할 것입니다.
Democratic Party leader Kim Han-gil fired back with criticism of his own.
President Park has proven incompetent in looking after people's livelihoods. She's ignored democracy. That's why people's lives are fraught with difficulties today. She bears the biggest responsibility for the hard lives of the people.
The president's message was echoed by the ruling Saenuri Party, which has called on the opposition party to take the tents down and return to parliament.
I politely asked the Democratic Party to rethink its controversial stance, which I did not see coming, and help us resume parliamentary business to work on livelihood issues.
Political analyst Lee Chul-hee told Arirang TV Tuesday that the gap between President Park and the ruling party on one side and the Democratic Party on the other is great, and that it is impossible to project at this point when and how the situation will be resolved. Kim Yeon-ji, Arirang News.
The foreign experts' take on talks that ended without an agreement and ending parliamentary impasse and how the ongoing gridlock will affect the country's political situation. We bring in Dr. Hong Sung-pil, professor of law at Yonsei University, in the studio. Welcome to the program.
Good to be back. Yeah.
So, Professor, this meeting took 40 days, over 40 days to organize, and we came out without a compromise or any kind of agreement. Did this come as a surprise to you?
No, not at all. I mean, it seems apparent that from the very beginning, both parties and the presidential office had no clear positive objectives or purpose or future prospects for this meeting. I mean, it's apparent from the atmosphere, the way they treat each other.
Well, looking back at yesterday's talks, from start to finish, President Park appeared firm on her initial stance. What did you make of her approach at the talks?
Well, I mean, in my view, she is applying sort of the Korean Peninsula process, so which is her North Korea actually strategy, and she's applying that to she's also applying that to the minority party, which is based upon the trust building and the process. So I think that's the reason why she's sort of sticking to the principles, and then also manageable political, management, I think. That kind of principled approach is good, but there's a danger it can be seen to the people like a very strict approach as well, and especially at a time when the cooperation with the minority party is really, really in need.
Well, speaking of the minority party, the DP leader said that he's going to go back to his outdoor camp in Seoul Plaza, where his party has been for a very long time instead of at the National Assembly. How do you think the Korean public is viewing this latest quagmire? How are they viewing the DP? How are they viewing the ruling party?
I mean, it is natural for opposition leaders and politicians to be placed in the National Assembly itself, not on the street, and for longer than 50 days. But in a way, it has something to do with the Korean politician and political tradition, and it has something to do with the tendency of the minority party. And also, this is the formative year of Park's administration itself. So it is, in a way, it's about taming each other. So this is time to get political initiatives. And so if they feel, if they retreat from here, then there will be no success or victory after all.
Well, how will the parliamentary gridlock affect President Park and his running of state affairs in the second half of the year?
I mean, people pay highest attention to the issues of economic democratization and welfare and taxation, and also and how about the threats from North Korea. So, I mean, it's on the shoulder of both majority and minority party to sort of put forward an affordable answer to these questions and to these wishes. Otherwise, I think not only the minority party, but Park Geun-hye administration itself will face difficulties.
Well, much of this parliamentary impasse has to deal with events that happened in the past. What is the objective of both parties in looking back at the past when there's a lot that the country wants to be done in terms of the future?
First, this political season is coming. The election is coming in the next month, and local election is coming in the next year. So until then, I think both parties will exert their best efforts to get a political victory over each other. And the reason why they, both minority and majority parties stick to the past instead of future is that they want to solve the future problems, future political problems, by making use of the events in the past. So, so-called involvement of NIS in the presidential election, and also NLL, the loss of the presidential record thing. It did happen 6 years ago, but they still want to make use of those things for their future plans for the political maneuvering.
And that works with Korean voters?
In a way, because this is a time of the rivalry of isms rather than rivalry of policies.
All right. Okay, Professor Hong, thank you very much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure again.
Before your day ends and another begins, get the latest news live from Seoul.
Residents whose features
restrictions is on the rise.
Closing ceremony.
Expert analysis from Asia's heartbeat.
The legislature, circumstances.
With a viewpoint only Korea's global network can provide.
The United States, the latest report.
Unrivaled access from a team always on standby.
Meaning came on the news are trying to cover up the South's true intentions of maintaining confrontation.
Over at the reopened Kaesong Industrial Complex, hundreds of South Koreans made the short trip again this Tuesday to oversee their second day of production. Our Kim Hyun-bin also tells us how the two Koreas are discussing additional ideas to improve operations and attract foreign investment.
Over 300 South Korean personnel streamed across the border to work on Tuesday to start their second day back at the Kaesong Industrial Complex. South Korea's Unification Ministry says that out of the 123 South Korean firms with facilities at Kaesong, 90 returned to work on Monday, and over 32,000 North Korean workers returned to their positions. The North Koreans seem pleased to be back at work.
Since the North Koreans were unemployed over the last few months, there seems to be an extra desire to work hard. But apart from that, the atmosphere doesn't seem that different from last time.
Most importantly, there has been a change in attitude from the North. I believe the complex will become the backbone for enhancing inter-Korean economic cooperation in the future.
Finishing last-minute preparations on Monday morning, companies fired up their machines in the afternoon. The South Korean workers noticed some of the positive changes that have been implemented to make their lives a little more convenient. South Korean personnel are now able to go in and out of the factory park up to 21 times a day. Before, they only had limited access at a designated time. In addition to the reopening, the two Koreas held their third joint committee meeting Monday, where they agreed to hold on an investors' relations fair on October 31st at the factory park. They'll attempt to attract foreign investment and develop the complex into a globally competitive production hub. Other issues that were discussed included the implementation of a radio frequency identification system to speed up vehicle passes across the border, as well as measures to better ensure the safety of South Korean workers at Kaesong. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
And the two Koreas are also gearing up for the reunions of families separated by the Korean War next week. Ahead of the emotional meeting, our Hwang Sung-hee met with one of the 96 selected participants and tells us how this woman has been waiting for more than 60 years to see her sisters.
좋은 명절 보내세요. 네, 안녕하세요. 감사합니다.
For 86-year-old Ha Kyung-ok, Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, was just another busy day at work, not an occasion for family gatherings. She has been separated from her family for more than 60 years, since leaving her hometown of Kaesong in North Korea for what was supposed to be a short trip to the south.
I didn't know that Kaesong would be blocked. I thought I would return soon. I left in spring and I thought I would be back by fall, but it's taken this long.
This Chuseok, Kyung-ok is all smiles as she awaits to reunite with her sisters next week after 6 decades of separation. She is one of the lucky 96 divided family members from the south that will travel to North Korea's Mount Kumgang next Wednesday for the first round of family reunions. Millions of Koreans were separated from their families during the Korean War in the 1950s, and time is running out for them to see each other again. Nearly 80% of the participants from both Koreas selected for next week's meeting are over the age of 80. There are still more than 70,000 separated family members in the south, like Kyung-ok, waiting to be reunited with their loved ones someday. But for those attending the reunion, 3 days will not be enough to catch up for the 60 years they were separated.
How they have been, how they have lived. I want to know all these things, how their lives have been.
Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
Now, a deadly shootout in Washington, D.C. More than a dozen people were killed after gunmen opened fire at a U.S. Navy installation on Monday. Authorities say a suspected gunman is among the dead, yet it is unclear what prompted the rampage. Our Kim Ji-yeon has more.
The gunman who killed at least 12 people on Monday morning at a U.S. naval office in Washington, D.C. was identified as former U.S. Navy serviceman and sailor Aaron Alexis. The 34-year-old shooter who died during the rampage was discharged from service for misconduct after serving in the Naval Reserves for 4 years from 2007 to 2011. Local media reports say that Alexis had run-ins with the law in the past. In 2004, he was arrested for shooting the car tires of a civilian, and in 2010 was questioned by authorities for firing his gun while in an apartment building. Alexis said it was an accidental discharge at the time.
And as he came around the corner, he aimed his gun at us, and he fired at least 2 or 3 shots. And we ran down the stairs to get out of the building.
The rampage took place less than 6 kilometers from the White House and 1 kilometer from the Capitol. The Pentagon and other public buildings have strengthened security, while departures were suspended at the Reagan National Airport. Workers at the Navy installation were also ordered to evacuate, and nearby schools were closed temporarily. Meanwhile, U.S. President Barack Obama offered his condolences to the victims and called the shootings a cowardly act.
Investigation moves forward, we will do everything in our power to make sure whoever carried out this cowardly act is held responsible.
The motive for the attack is not yet known, but so far officials say that there's no indication it was an act of terrorism. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
The result of the UN inspection on Syria's use of chemical weapons is out. UN officials say there's clear and convincing evidence that a deadly nerve agent was used. Though the report doesn't point to who the culprit is, Western governments are planning to seek tougher UN resolution against the Syrian regime. Yoo Di-an has the details.
The highly anticipated UN inspector's report has confirmed what Western governments had suspected all along, that the nerve agent sarin was used in last month's chemical attack near Damascus.
Chemical weapons were used on a relatively large scale in the Ghouta area of Damascus on August 21st, causing numerous casualties, particularly among civilians.
The report added the weather conditions on that day ensured as many people as possible would be affected. It says temperatures were falling between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., which meant that air was falling down, allowing heavy gas to penetrate into lower levels of buildings where many were seeking shelter. The report doesn't say who was responsible for the attack, but Western governments refuse to believe it was anyone other than the Syrian government.
We've always believed, as you know, that this was the work, this was the responsibility of the Assad regime, and everything we can see in this report is fully consistent with that.
And it's very important to note that the regime possesses sarin, and we have no evidence that the opposition possesses sarin.
Earlier on Monday, France, Britain, and the United States agreed to seek a strong and robust UN resolution by the end of the week that binds Syria to remove its chemical weapons under a set deadline. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry told a news conference in Paris that the three powers agreed with Russia that President Assad will suffer consequences if he fails to comply with UN demands. Russia, which struck the deal with the United States, cautioned against imposing tough penalties, adding such threats could wreck attempts for a diplomatic solution to the crisis. Yurian, Arirang News.
The South Korean pitcher Ryu Hyun-jin was on the mound once again for the LA Dodgers against division rivals, the Arizona Diamondbacks.
And Stephen Che is in the Sports Center to tell us how he fared. Stephen.
Hey guys, the Dodgers lefty seeking his 14th win was brilliant for most of the matchup, but several factors cost him the game. He walked the very first D-backs batter and gave up a 2-run homer to first baseman Paul Goldschmidt, making it 2-0 off the bat. But after that, he was literally lights out, retiring the next 23 of 24 batters in the 2-hit complete game loss. The other biggest factor was the lack of run support. A 6th-inning bases-loaded walk by the D-backs pitcher sent Ryu home for the only Dodgers run of the game. The Dodgers lost 2-1, putting the 26-year-old's season record at 13-7. And moving on to world football, Bayer Leverkusen strikers Son Heung-min will play in his first UEFA Champions League match against Manchester United on Tuesday at Old Trafford. It's a big match, but Son says the pressure's off him and his team and rather on new United manager David Moyes. And for a bit of drama, the 21-year-old this summer turned down the chance to play for Man U, his favorite team as a child. The second leg will be played at Bayer Arena in Germany in late November. And rounding the bases, it's time for Tuesday's top KBO matchup. The LG Twins took on the SK Wyverns in Incheon. The Twins at first place, the Wyverns at 5th. Now we go to the first. It's the Twins, Honju in singles to bring one home. It's 1-0. Now we go to the fourth, the Wyverns, Chejong. He homers to left. Scores are level 1-1. But in the next inning, LG's reliable Park Yong-taek singles to score a run. It's 2-1 LG up. We go to the sixth, SK's Park Jae-sang. He also hits a 2-run shot to right. SK leads 3-2. But in the 7th inning, LG small ball brings in 3 runs, putting them up by a bunch, and they go on to win this one with a final score of 5-3. And looking at the scores from around the league, Kia takes it over Hanwha 5-2. Samsung wins over Tusan 4-3, and Nexon beats Lotte 7-1. That does it for me here in the Sports Center. This has been Stephen Che. Check back at midnight for the latest in the world of sports.
Let's now go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Hello, Bo-kyung.
Hello, Sean and Chi-hye.
The Bo-kyung, Chuseok officially begins on Wednesday. How's the weather shaping up?
Well, it looks like we're going to have another bright and sunny day. Let's take a look at our satellite map for the details. The nation is under the influence of a high pressure system from the West Sea. This is why we're seeing clear skies throughout the nation. But those of you in the inland regions should wake up to a foggy morning. Tomorrow we have another beautiful autumn weather in the forecast. Those of you who are headed home, please be sure to dress accordingly because there should be a big temperature gap of about 10 degrees between the days and nights. Other than that, it looks like we should be able to catch a full moon on the day of Chuseok, which is Thursday. Now, taking a closer look at tomorrow's forecast, Seoul and Daegu should get up to 32 degrees, which is 2 degrees higher than today. Meanwhile, Busan should make it to 29. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Jeju should top out at 30 and 28 degrees respectively. Meanwhile, Mangkeumgang should peak at 21. Well, that's all I have for you this hour. Have a wonderful evening and join me for another update after midnight.
And that's our broadcast on this Tuesday night. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us. Have a great evening. We'll see you soon.